For a sentence to be considered a complete sentence, it must have a subject and a verb. Most sentences will also have an object. The subject is the person or thing doing the verb, and the object is the thing having the verb done to it. So in this case, we have a girl. She's the subject because she is doing the walking. That's my verb. And then down the street is my object because that's where she's walking. So since we have a subject, a verb, and an object, we have a complete sentence. In the sentence above, we have the girl, the subject, and we also have a verb, walked. That too is a complete sentence because although we don't have an object, the object is not required. However, in the top sentence, we only have the girl, the subject, no verb. So without a verb, we would consider this not to be a complete sentence. There are a few ways in which a verb can actually become part of an adjective phrase. When a verb is preceded by the word who, which, or that, or when the verb ends in ing, that verb becomes part of an adjective phrase describing the subject. So while the sentence, "the girl walked down the street," is a totally fine and complete sentence, when I say the girl who walked down the street, the walk down the street now becomes an adjective phrase designed to simply clarify which girl I'm talking about. So now my sentence has a subject and a very long adjective phrase, but no verb. So I no longer have a complete sentence. And I have the same problem when I say the girl that walked down the street. The that walked down the street is simply telling me which girl I'm talking about. So I no longer have a verb in the sentence. And the same for the girl walking down the street. No verb, so it's not a complete sentence. Incidentally, the girl which walked down the street is also not a complete sentence, but it's doubly wrong because you would never use which to describe a person. Again, let's compare two sentences. The sentence, "This book is one of my favorites," is a fine and complete sentence. We have a subject, this book, followed by a verb phrase, "is one of my favorites." When I add the which, however, before the is one of my favorites is no longer a verb phrase, but an adjective phrase describing which book I'm talking about. In other words, I no longer have a verb in the sentence, so it's not a complete sentence. There are a couple ways that we actually combine two complete sentences. For your exam, two complete sentences can be combined with either a semicolon or what's known as a comma conjunction. There are 7 conjunctions to know, and they all have 3 letters or less. So if you have a semicolon, or comma and, or comma but, or comma so, etc., you have to make sure that both sides of the conjunction, or both sides of the comma conjunction, are full and complete sentences. Which means that both sides of the semicolon, or both sides of the comma conjunction, have to have a subject and a verb. And likewise, if you have 2 complete sentences, you can only join them with a semicolon or a comma conjunction. So in this top sentence we have a subject, I, and then we have a verb, called, and then we have and, but no comma. And that's actually fine because after the and we have left a message, which is a verb, but we don't have a subject. So we don't need a comma conjunction because we're not really combining 2 complete sentences. However, in the third example we have I called your phone, so a subject and a verb. And in the last half of the sentence, we have I, the subject again, and then another verb, left a message. So now we have 2 complete sentences, which means before the conjunction, before the and, you absolutely must add a comma. The second example is also not correct because we have a comma and a conjunction, which means what comes after the and must be a complete sentence, but we only have left a message. We don't have a subject. The final example is correct because we have a comma and a conjunction, and then both sides of the comma conjunction have a subject and a verb. There is an exception for the comma conjunction rule, and that is when the comma conjunction is part of a list. So in the top example we have a comma and then we have the conjunction and that's followed by then left a message, which is a verb phrase but it does not have a subject. So it's really not a complete sentence. However, in this case it's actually fine because the then left a message is actually part of a list of verbs. The author says he called the phone, let it go to voicemail, and then left a message. And the comma "and" is simply used to signify that left a message is the last item in the list. Likewise, with the last example where the author is asking, should I hang up, leave a message, comma, or text you later? Yes, we have a comma conjunction, but it's part of a list of verbs, so the text you later portion does not have to be a complete sentence. These errors are harder to spot when the sentences are longer, but you do have to make sure that every sentence has a verb and a subject. In this case, our first verb phrase, "are consistently late," is preceded by who. So it's really an adjective describing the employees and not a verb. And likewise with forcing. It ends in ing, so once again, it's describing something previous in the sentence. And what comes after the ing is what's known as a big, long, modifying phrase. So if you scan through the rest of the sentence, there actually isn't another verb that is not a modifier. So as long as the sentence is, it's actually not a complete sentence because it doesn't have a verb, only adjectives and modifying phrases. To fix it, we could simply get rid of the who, and now my "are consistently late," that's a proper verb, or I could change the forcing simply into force. Either way, as long as I have a subject and a verb, then it's a complete sentence. The exception to that, however, is if certain words begin a sentence, like although, or unless, or while. When I have words like although, unless, or while at the beginning of my sentence, they make my first subject and verb part of this introductory phrase. So if I said, while the employees are late to meetings, yes, I have a subject, and yes, I have a verb, but the while made it an introduction, so it would still not be considered a complete sentence. In that case, we would have to have a second subject and a second verb in the last half of the sentence. In this sentence, we have two complete sentences. We have Mauritius was a British colony for almost 200 years. That's a complete sentence. And so is English was never spoken in the workplace. I have two ways that I can fix this run-on sentence. After my comma, I could add a conjunction, such as comma, but, or I could modify the beginning or end of my sentence to make either portion not a complete sentence. For example, I could add a although to the beginning of my sentence. And then, since although Mauritius was a British colony for almost 200 years, with the although it's not a complete sentence, at that point I would not need my comma conjunction.